Gambit lovers, I know what you're thinking. The London is as solid as they come. It's an absolute rock. There's no crazy gambits against this. Whatever I've come up with, it's not going to work. And you're probably thinking that this position that I have right in front of you from the London has already been studied so much. The move here, if you know, is knight to d5. This position has been studied to death. I'll turn on Stockfish for you here. It evaluates to a draw after some complicated lines. Or you're thinking, how did we even get to this position? And I'll show you that in a second. But the move I'm going to recommend to you here is just not even dealing with this knight c7 check, but just pawn takes d4. Just pawn takes d4, and you can already see how much Stockfish hates it, and I'm so excited to share with you what happens after, you know, most people here, you're seeing knight to c7 check, they're going to take the rook. But okay, you're probably asking, how did we get here? Which is fair enough. So the London has a reputation of being like uncrackable. Uncrackable. It's like there's gambits against every other line, but every time they play a London, we're like, oh my god, why did they have to do this? And at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a much more comprehensive overview of the current state of London theory and my recommendations even for white against what I'm recommending to you here. But so here, black is immediately striking with c5. The one downside of bishop f4 is that it undefends b2. But otherwise, London has reputation as a very solid opening. They typically put the pawns like this, very nice triangle, bring the knight out, and this is a very solid position for white. But we're immediately coming in with queen to b6, hitting the b2 pawn, and the best way for white to deal with it, again, at the end of this video, I'll do a comprehensive overview of London theory, excluding the position that I'm going to analyze for the bulk of this video. But knight to c3 is the best move for white. We can go in and take the pawn and knight to b5. We got our queen in some hot water in exchange for this pawn we're getting. It's actually white's doing the gambiting here. Our queen might get trapped a little bit, and also knight c7 is a threat. You need to know a ton of theory here with knight d5. It's the main line if you want to play this. Or so people thought. Or so people thought until the London Crusher 9000 is here. Pawn takes d4. Let's get those gambit glasses on. Let's see what is going on here. Okay, you see there's three moves that white is playing. There's knight c7 check, of course. Recapturing the pawn. Interesting. Or throwing in this move, rook to b1. And we play queen takes a2, and then white, again, has some options. Again, including taking the rook. Okay, you're probably wondering, what if they just take the rook? What if they just come in, knight to c7 check, our only move is here, and they just take our rook? Okay, here's the point of the London Crusher 9000. We take d4, not because we wanted this pawn so much, but because of black's next move. It's a very good one. The move is pawn to e5. We got this pawn out of the way for bishop to b4 check, and is very strong, and already white is in a ton of trouble. So they have to save this bishop, because like let's say they don't save this bishop. I mean, eventually we take it, and eventually we're gonna win that knight. And our king's not in really any danger, and white actually has no development. So the realities of this position, like you feel good you got a rook, but the realities of this position are going to set in for white very quickly. Okay, 13 out of 14 white players here, you see, have gone just bishop takes e5. What, like there's no value in going here or here, but immediately we come in bishop to b4 check. And here, queen d2 is obviously no good. c3, we just take that pawn. So white's only move is now going king up. We're a rook down. But now we have another very nice trick. I'll let you pause the video here to recommend a move for black. The move, very sneaky, pawn to d3 check. Pawn d3 check. The point is that we're going to snag that bishop. We're going to snag that bishop in a second. Okay, I mean, everybody here is playing queen takes d3. I mean, what else can you do? You can't take with the pawn. There's a pin here. So queen takes d3, and we just take this bishop. Now, okay, we've already gotten one bishop back, and we're hitting that rook over there. And okay, I mean, we see rook b1, rook d1 like approximately equally. But the other thing we want to do is actually put that knight right there. So, I mean, rook d1, we're just going to play knight e4. And you see here, we're already threatening knight to c3 check. This king's in a terrible spot. I mean, it's like very difficult to recommend a move for white in this position. b6 is coming, which has two ideas. One is just scooping up that knight. Another is putting that bishop right on a6. Which is going to win the queen. So a very not good situation for white. Knight c3 check is very, like, let's say knight f3, knight to c3 check. King's now got to move on to this killer check with the bishop. This can come with check. So we're easily scooping up our material here. You'll already note white's rook advantage is completely gone in this position. And if rook to b1, Again, like they have to save this rook. We play just knight to d5, defending our bishop. Same threat, knight c3 check. This light square bishop is going to be great either here or here. And another not good position for white. So where did white go wrong? Where did white go wrong? It seems like they actually just followed all the most obvious moves. Sorry, there was a bug. They followed all the most obvious moves. Okay, there was one branching point here. The engine's recommendation is actually not bishop takes e5, even though like everyone's playing it, and the only person who didn't was bishop g3. But rook to b1. Rook to b1, because bishop takes e5 actually hung the bishop anyway in that line, right? So they throw in this rook to b1, and we'll look at rook to b1 at a couple other moments in this line. But so, okay, we still go check, king e2, and pawn to d3 check. Pawn to d3 check. It's just such a great resource. I love this resource because so they can't take with the pawn because this is pinned. If they take with the queen, they lose that rook whole, right? So we have all this checks. This king's in a terrible spot. These are just not developed at all. So what do you do here? You go king takes. We just come back check. We just come back check. King e2, and we just scoop up that bishop. So this was the engine's top recommendation, but it's again like. What are you doing here with this knight? That knight is totally toast. It's going to die either like that, or like b6 is a move we want to play. We're going to put our bishop either on a6 or b7 again. Also, we have the idea of playing like let's say like knight f3 or something. We play rook e8. And my next move that I want to play is maybe checkmate. Take, checkmate. So that looks pretty fun. That's another threat we have on the table. Rook to b3 here seemed like the most intuitive move to me. Hitting our queen, but I just wanted to demonstrate another nice resource we have. Knight e4. Knight e4 is a great move, a great way to defend the queen while still activating even more pieces. It's just so hard to come up with stuff for white here. Probably b6 is my next move if I'm playing black. I think the point is if you take my queen, I'm going to take back, so I already got a rook for the queen, and then king's got to move. Check. And then I'll scoop up that knight, and I'll be up a piece once I do. So that's just so many fun lines here. Rook to b1 is the engine's actually top choice, but it's still not very good. Okay, so what should white do? What should white do? Taking the rook just ran into immediate trouble after e5, and this idea of bishop to b4 check with d3. There's just nothing that blocks this diagonal. What can white do about this? So one idea is actually one of the engine's top choices is adding this move rook to b1 first. So rook to b1, it's so hard to realize this because I mean you see most people here are just going in with knight c7 check. They want to take that rook, but they throw in this move rook to b1 first. Okay, so we go queen takes a2. Now they can come knight c7 check. So now knight c7 check and taking here. So this is the best way white can play because now this rook is covering the bishop on b4. So this is Stockfish's top recommendation, I believe. Yes, so Stockfish, I believe, if we go back here, we'll say rook to b1 was the best resource for white. But okay, so check and knight takes a8. So what do we do now? We still play e5. We're still playing e5 because the point is, so we don't have access to the b4 square, but we actually have access to the a5 square. This diagonal is very, very vulnerable now that we've gone takes. So there's only one game in this position, but bishop takes e5 isn't a very good move because of queen to a5 check, and we're going to scoop up that bishop. We're just going to scoop that bishop right up. So queen d2, for example, and queen takes e5. And, you know, just getting this much material, getting that bishop whole, and we're probably going to get that knight as well. I think this position is already, yeah, it's already actually very good for white, or for black, sorry. King e2 is also playable, but again, we just take that bishop, and we're doing very well. So taking the pawn on e5 is actually a bit of a mistake. What Stockfish recommends is moving the bishop. So you need to save that material. Bishop to g5, I mean, these are very hard moves to see. And the move I'm going to recommend to you now, because I think if white has actually found rook to b1, and has actually found bishop to g5, they're probably very, very good. And they're probably much better than you at chess, and you should have no shame drawing them with black. So that's the assumption I'm gonna be working with here. And so I'm gonna recommend this move queen to a5 check. We are down a full rook. It does matter, you know. If we're doing nothing, if we're just like kind of like knight c6, it's fine. But if we do nothing, right, and white's just able to castle their king, it is a rook. It is a rook, guys. So I'm gonna recommend this move queen to a5 check. And so, okay, it's like, why? Just queen d2. There's no bishop to b4 here. The rook is in the right spot, but I'm just going to recommend going back queen e2. And this sets a devious little trap, because what white almost should do is this move like queen d1, which offers just a repeat. However, I think the most intuitive way to deal with your rook being attacked if you're white is rook to d1. And rook to d1 is actually quite the blunder. I'm going to let you guys maybe think about what you would recommend here for black. So the move is queen to b2. It's this nasty move, queen to b2, and we're threatening bishop to b4. And you think about this for white, and you're like, how do I stop this bishop to b4 resource? This diagonal is so vulnerable. There's really almost no way to stop it. I believe c3, and we can maybe just take that pawn. Yeah, let's just take that pawn and let's get a super dangerous fast pawn all the way down the board here. So, and we're still coming in with check. So this is a bit of a funny position. But if white just plays rook to b3, I believe just queen to a1 check. And again, these are like checks that are very hard to get out of. You're going to have to bring that king to e2. And then b6 is going to come. This bishop can come to b7 or a6. Like, this position is no fun for white. I mean, if you're white here, you almost want to just take the draw of queen d2, queen d1. I don't think even... Yeah, okay, that's even Stockfish's recommendation in this position of just queen d2, queen a1. Or it recommends down the line to play like pawn c3 at some point here. But it seems like a very suspect kind of way to play. I think this is just much more fun for black. And you'll note, like, black has played this move king to d8. They've moved their king, but the king is never in any danger whatsoever. It's perfectly safe there. And the absolute worst case scenario for black is that they go down exchange for, I mean, 4 pawns. There's 4 pawns that black is ahead here. But they go down in exchange because that knight is toast in every line. So this is super fun stuff. This is still super fun stuff, and it's with Stockfish's top choice that claims to be plus 2.5. It claims to be plus 2.5 by playing rook to b1, but I just am not seeing it. I am just not seeing any proof in that regard. So another choice that the engine offers is pawn takes d4. A simple recapture on d4. And of course, we are going with all reliable. We are not changing our mind and starting to defend the c7 square by knight a6, knight d5. Pawn to e5. Pawn to e5. And so this is a crazy position now. I am going to analyze here 5 moves for white. Bishop takes e5, d takes e5, knight c7, rook b1, and Stockfish's top choice. I would be very surprised and very impressed if any of you got it. I did narrow it down by saying it wasn't one of those moves. Stockfish's top choice is this move bishop to d2, and I will still address it. But bishop to d2 is what you need to find in order to preserve an advantage here as white. And it's a very unintuitive move. It might be like a little bit more intuitive now that I've pointed out and I've actually shown you all the issues with this diagonal that white needs to shield, because bishop to b4, it's coming. It's coming. We have the same position, but with these pawns off the board. Bishop to b4 check is very powerful. Okay, pawn to e5. Let's talk about all these options for white, but don't worry, a lot of them transpose into one another. Okay, bishop takes e5 I think it's the most common and it's kind of the most logical, but of course we're coming in check. And now again, I'll look at both king to e2 and pawn to c3. So pawn to c3, I think is it's an interesting option, but we're just going to take it. And the point is that, you know, white's knight is still here at least, like they haven't gone knight c7, otherwise this would be basically checkmate. So they take it. And the thing is, this is not a gambit at all. Boy, yeah, like we may have almost forgotten it, but this is not a gambit at all. In fact, we're actually up a pawn. It's only a gambit if they take our rook. So guys, if we just castle here, white's just completely lost. Not only are they down a pawn, but their king's in the middle of the board, and just rook to e8 and knight c6 are coming. Pressure here, pressure here. We're gonna play pawn b6 and bishop to a6 check. Checkmate. That's looking like checkmate. If they take the knight, things are even worse for them. We just take it back, and then how are you gonna guard this? This is like checkmate. I mean, anytime, like you see in these lines, white's going e2, and it's like a necessity, but it's like the king's so bad there, it just boxes in all this and makes itself so vulnerable to that being checkmate or that being checkmate. So not a good situation for white here, down a pawn and getting checkmated. No fun at all. They need this knight to at least give them something for their troubles by taking that rook. So here king e2 is playable. King e2 is playable. And we can grab, again, we force king e2 and we haven't even lost our rook yet. So we can grab a hold of our senses and not lose the rook, but that's not happening. I'm recommending here knight c6. Knight c6. Okay, The top engine recommendation here, well, 7 out of 8 people are not doing it. Knight c7 check, I will give you a hint, is not the top recommendation and is going to lose for white. But the top recommendation is like queen to b1, after which we can just trade it and guard against knight c7. Rook to e8 is coming, and this endgame it's very, very solid, very playable for black. It's a pretty interesting position, but I think black's king position, like white's king is pretty vulnerable here. But queen to b1 is an interesting move. It forces the trade of queens. Rook to b1, it's playable, but like we can just take this pawn at any moment. Okay, knight c7 check. White wants that rook. White wants that rook. Everybody's doing it. Everybody wants that rook. You see here, black is overwhelmingly playing rook to e8, but I am not going to recommend that. In fact, I'm going to recommend taking this bishop. Just taking the bishop. White like really has to take it. There's really not much they can do. Takes. And the move here, just recapturing. Just recapturing, and there's a game here where white just gets checkmated, because this is basically checkmate. So king to f3, this is check. And now anything that happens, king e2, I told you it was a bad spot. This is mate. This is mate. There's no block when you step your king there. So this is crazy. We got some fun mating patterns here. Check. And I mean, pick your checkmate. This is checkmate. We use all our pieces here. Very, very fun mating patterns. And there was one other thing I want to show after rook to b1. I think there was this move. I thought rook to e8 worked. No, rook to e8 doesn't work. Okay, so just queen c3 and a minus 24 advantage, minus 25 advantage it'll have to do. So, okay. But yes, taking this rook, not a good idea. So after bishop takes e5, guys, we just play knight c6. We keep bringing out these pieces. They, like every time they fish for this rook, if we're able to get this bishop to b4 check out, and like this king's here, that king is so vulnerable, and it is definitely worth actually us losing that rook whole. Because again, we can always scoop up that knight at a later date in the worst case scenario. In the best case scenario, which has been happening a lot, the remainder of our pieces will checkmate that king. So bishop takes e5, not really a good option, even though it's the most common one. Okay, what about pawn takes e5? Is that any better? Well, not really. We still come out with the check. White does have one more option than in the prior position, which is this move bishop to d2. But bishop to d2 isn't really that helpful because you can't take with your queen. You can't take with your queen. It's busy defending that rook. So you go king takes. We're jumping in with another piece, knight to e4 check. And now what are you doing with this king? I mean, presumably it's got to guard f2. And again, so white's king is in a disastrous situation, whereas ours can just castle whenever it feels like it. And white is up no material, not even one pawn, not even one pawn. They never fished for this rook. This is them without even bothering to fish for that rook. So, okay, king to e3. We can just snag this pawn. Knight back, queen e7. And, you know, we're threatening. So, like, for example, now if they try to take our rook, because of this issue here, we're threatening there to take the queen. This is check, so we're going to win the queen with a nice discovered check here. So that's no good. King to e1, it's playable, but just knight c6. Just knight c6 because, again, we're torturing them with the point that you can't go knight c7. They have just no defense along here. Knight c7 check will lose because of queen c3 check. No block, even because of that knight controls. King e2, and then knight d4, which is basically checkmate. Look at these knights just hopping in. Like, all these lines are just so fun. They're so awesome. I was so excited when making all this theory. Okay, they have to give their queen here, and they can pretty much resign. So I just wanted to demonstrate some super cool lines that can happen in these positions. So bishop to d2, they afforded themselves one additional option by taking with the pawn, but it really wasn't that helpful for them. So, okay, they can play here pawn to c3. It's the most common move. We just simply collect it. So they have their knight there. It's hanging around. They can take stuff, and they can play now bishop to d2, so they have that block. They don't have to go king e2 and, you know, get mated as the king typically does on e2. Queen d2 loses that rook. So they did it. They can block. But unfortunately for them, we take this other pawn as well. Unfortunately for them, after we castle here, we're just 2 pawns ahead. Again, they didn't take stuff. They didn't take stuff, and it's just like okay, they have some like solid compensation here, but we're just gonna bring our pieces out. It's like they really like their position's fine, but they're just 2 pawns down. They didn't get mated, but they're just 2 pawns down, and so it's not very fun for white. You know, just minus 1.5. You know, they have 0.5 points of compensation, but not the option they were looking for. Okay, what if they do something a little more ambitious and they go with king to e2? They go with king to e2. So, okay, they're saying, I'm still attacking your knight and I'm still threatening knight c7. What do you got? What do you got? Well, this is what we got. Knight e4. Again, just hop in. Everything forward. We are going all out here. So if they come and try to take our rook, as it typically does, it fails. Knight c3, check, winning the queen here. So okay, the knight on b5, it's still hanging on to c3 by a thread. And there's one game in this position where white found this nice move rook to b1. And in this position, we can untangle ourselves from this attack simply by playing knight c3, which actually just offers a trade here. I mean, they pretty much have to accept. The knight's kind of hitting too much stuff for them to not take it. And after queen takes c3, so we are not down any pawns. And I think we got to be pretty satisfied with the position. In terms of the relative king safety here, we've already demonstrated how bad this king is on e2. We're threatening like check to take that. We're threatening more stuff coming in here, bishop a6, whereas our king's going to be safe and sound. So I don't think you're wanting to play this very much if you're white. So that pretty much exhausts all the options for taking on e5 and then trying to block against bishop to b4 check. Bishop to b4 check is just too strong. It's just too strong. Okay, so we'll look at a couple other things here. So there's knight c7. There's knight c7. And now if you try to go after this rook, I assume you guys can guess the move. So pawn takes f4. If you thought it's not a bad idea, but just bishop to b4 check is too strong. It's too strong. Even with bishop to d2 as an option here for white, it's still going to end very poorly. Okay, king e2, I think it's definitely ending worse after like rook to e8 check. So, okay, bishop to d2, you still have that bishop on the board. You may as well try to use it. King takes, you need to play. So the queen can still defend here. But here, black actually has, I think, a variety of ways to finish white off because, okay, so knight to e4 check. We're still going to hop in. We've kind of seen patterns like this. They kind of keep coming up. Again, what are you doing with this king? I think everything is pretty bad here. As king to e1, for example, we just go check. King to e2, and I think just b6 finishes the game. Yeah, so then bishop to a6 is coming next, and it's an unstoppable threat. Even if queen d3, bishop to a6 would just win the queen. Otherwise, it's winning the game. There's really nothing you can do if you're white here about this bishop coming to a6. And I don't think there was any better spot for the king. So king to e3, we can have a look at this. So check, it's saying. So if you go queen up, then you lose this rook. If you go bishop here, then check and like mate is coming. And what happens if you take our knight? So you got to keep coming out. You got to keep coming out. We go check here. Some very fun king run lines. So let's say you take this pawn. Okay, check and mate. Check and mate. King d6 was also queen c6. We can mate the king all the way down on d6 with the support of our king. With the support of our king covering the e7 square. I love these lines. Okay, king takes d5 was the only other move, and we can get, it appears something similar. Eventually enough checks. We're using some pieces here. Check. This is the only move. Check. Thing is, like even white's king actually came back. It made it back, but it still had just no friends. There were no friends to help like block or control any squares. So here the only move is queen g4. After which it just takes. So king f3. Also queen g4 with the support of this bishop. So I mean that king is getting tracked down. Some very, very fun lines. Some very, very fun lines. So this was not working. This was not working. They can't just go knight c7 check and take our rook. They do have one other option here, which is bishop takes e5. But I think you guys can guess what's going on, which is check, king e2, and here, knight c6. And this is actually transposing to another position that we looked at, where knight takes e8, and if you remember, the move was knight takes e5. And taking, and then just taking again. And then this king was getting checkmated in these lines here. It was king here, queen check, and some nice roller mates around there. So this is just no fun at all. No fun at all. Okay, so we've looked at a lot of things that don't work for white. After knight c7, so there's this other move, rook to b1. Other move, rook to b1, and the engine typically likes throwing in rook to b1 because it likes that the rook controls this b4 square. Here, I think it's a little bit too late though, because we play bishop to b4 check, and we're able to get this in. So for example, c3, take, bishop d2, and we just take here, and here we're just up too much stuff. We're just up too much stuff. We can here just move our queen, I think, just about anywhere. Okay, check. And we're up 3 pawns. So white didn't get mated because they had this to come back, but it still wasn't very fun for them. So they had another option here, which was, so like there's bishop to d2 that can come back. But again, just trade, and we can save our queen. And so this is, or I'm sorry, knight e4 check. And we've looked at this line already. So king to e2 was an option, but just takes. So this was an interesting line, actually, with king to e2, because now, so this rook is hitting our bishop. So we got to play queen takes a2, they take our bishop, and we take f4. Now we're threatening to castle, so they need to come grab our rook. Knight c7 check, and they take our rook, right? So we play rook to e8. If they didn't take our rook, we were just going to castle and just be down no material. So king d3, and there's this move now, just d5. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting position. We're a full rook down, but this king's just so unsafe that the engine just says this is completely lost. It's just completely lost because there's knight c6 and bishop f5, and then like that king is just gonna get like mated like that after this check, and then the king on c3 is gonna get hit with knight e4. So super fun. Okay, so we need to get to what I'd actually recommend for white. There's king to f3 here, but I think that's it just gets mated. Some other fun mate lines. I'll finish the lines here of check and mate. Okay, so what would I actually recommend white to do? What is white to do? They are to do this amazing move. 8 people have found it. Bishop to d2. Okay, bishop to d2. It kind of stops our big idea. Bishop to b4 was kind of the origin, the catalyst of everything else. And without it, what are we to do? So most people have been like, okay, let me just guard c7, I'll bow out. I refuse to bow out. We are all in. Once we are in, we are all in. And even though we're not downing material right now, I'd still say we're in. We play here knight to c6. Okay, knight to c6. I'm gonna get to like all the engine's recommendations here. So okay, there's this move knight to c7 check. And they take our rook, right? Okay, we're a rook down and we don't even have bishop to b4. Only that we do. I'm still playing bishop to b4. We still have our knights out, right? Remember how helpful our knights were here. And with bishop to b4 is this threat of taking d2 and forcing king takes d2. Right, because that rook is it. So for example, like rook b1 is no good, because here you got to play king takes so your queen defends, and then knight e4 check, and then you just get toasted by all these pieces here. So in this position, presumably white's playing bishop takes, but now we can play queen takes, check, so the queen's got to step up, and just back queen b2, hitting this rook. Rook comes over, and knight to e4. So these lines are very tricky, but we hit that queen, and now we're again trying to bring back with queen to b4 check. So this queen is hit, and we go here queen to b4, and now if this knight controls these squares, it's hard to block these checks, whether it's a queen or a bishop, and if you can't block those checks, then you have to play king e2 again, and white never has fun playing king to e2. So big issues, even when you guys saw that how powerful bishop to d2 was according to the engine. Okay, white has one more option, which is knight to f3. So now, to be clear, to get to this point, white already had to find, right? So here we were. White already, first they had to know London theory to get to this point. They had to find pawn takes d4, resist the temptation, take this rook immediately, right? Then here, they had to find the amazing improbable bishop to d2. Then they had to take this rook at exactly the right time. This is the refutation, and this is the only one I've found. Then they have to know here to play knight to f3, because it fortifies the bishop here. So now, one of the tricks in this position, I believe pawn to e4 was a good move, but I have here knight takes d4, which is also an interesting line. So knight takes d4 puts a lot of pressure, I guess. So if the bishop comes out, we can take this, and the point is we want to take and force king takes in all lines, right? So if they take our knight first, bishop takes d2, king takes d2, queen takes would lose the rook. So king takes d2, we're taking here with check, and basically here we just kind of have a ton of compensation. So bishop to d3, not only is that pawn hanging, but we have knight to e4 check, very strong move. King can't go to c1, we're going to take that rook. Otherwise, we can take on f2, which is like checkmate. So in this position, king to e1, but just queen c3 check, and again, it causes more issues because there's no queen d2 in all these lines because that rook hangs. Basically, keep throwing stuff at them. Keep throwing stuff at them, and eventually something might work out. So the other move here that white can try is rook to b1 first, taking, and then throwing in knight to c7 check. King to d8, knight takes. But I think here, yes, the move was just knight takes d4. Basically, I mean, the worst case scenario, so knight takes d4, like we hit c2. The worst case scenario here was, and we just play like a move like b6. We just scoop up that knight. We have a few pawns for this rook, a few pawns and a piece for this rook. Even if white kind of escapes, they found a series of absolutely improbable moves. So like, I'll have to give it to them. I will have to concede that advantage if you're able to find like all this crazy stuff. I think the line I was talking about here was with knight f3 and then this move pawn to e4. Pawn to e4, I think it was this move bishop out. Unless I confused it with something else, I'm sorry. It was this move, oh, knight f3 first. Okay, knight f3 first was the top engine recommendation. That's actually, I think, the only way to preserve the advantage. It was knight f3 first, then after pawn to e4. Okay, so bishop to d2 has one more added bonus, right? It looks like bishop c3 traps the queen, but there's bishop to b4, right? And you noticed every time that rook moves that there's queen takes e2. So bishop to b4 has this pin over here. So one thing white wants to do is to be able to get castled very quickly to be able to play bishop to c3 without having to deal with bishop over here and the hit that it provides on their king. So the key move here, the only move that preserves the advantage, is this crazy move, bishop to c4. It was bishop to c4 takes and then castles. Was the line I was looking at when I ran this deeper on Stockfish and Leela. This was the only way I think that white can hold their advantage. So really crazy stuff. Really crazy stuff, but super fun. Okay, I will say one other thing, which is that very few people have done this. Like this position, so it's occurred 87 times, plus other transpositions. Very few people have done this, but 2 out of those people have played here just rook to a1 back, just rook b1, rook a1, and you know, if we don't have bishop to b4, so this is before we've gotten in e5, so they can just spam rook a1, rook b1. We can't go here, because knight c7 wins our queen. That's just a little too much. Happy to give the rook, but it wins our queen. That's a little too much, and this is a draw. This is a draw. So if you play this, you have to concede that there's like a low probability that your opponent just draws the game right away with rook to b1, rook to a1. But I think with queen takes b2, you are actually giving them that opportunity in every line, even the absolute main line here with knight to d5. Of course, a lot of people here just play rook to b1. And then, yeah, this is the most common move in both these positions, is just taking this draw. So, you know, it is what it is. But it's unlikely to come to that. It's more likely to come to those super awesome lines. And this gives me a great segue to talk about London theory. All right, the London opening. The dreaded London opening. The reputation as the super solid, uncrackable line. Credit to Eric Rosen, who I think has changed that reputation to add, I think, the word dynamic. A lot of people would actually use to describe the London these days, or at least, you know, it's like helped to change the minds of London haters. I'm partially a London hater, like me, of thinking the line's very dry. There are some very like testy lines that white can play, and you know, white can launch strong attacks from certain lines here. But c5, I think, is definitely the most dynamic way to play against the London. And okay, here already, e3 is definitely the main option. E3 is definitely the main option. If you're a London player, I still would recommend you to play e3, because the other options, which are d5 and d takes c5, are very much changing the position. So d5, it starts to look like a Benoni, like it can start to look like a Benoni structure a little bit, but this bishop on f4 is pretty badly misplaced. So after, actually a good move for black here is actually this move like b5, I've read. So bishop to b7 can hit this pawn, and now there's really no knight c3 because of this move b4. There's no c4 because like we can take it, and so it's a little bit tricky for white because bishop b7's coming. This bishop will also sit very well on g7 and have a very nice diagonal across here. So, you know, d5, it's playable. It's totally playable, and I think it's definitely like the 1a, 1b with pawn to e3. So d takes c5 is an option as well, just kind of snagging that pawn. It has the little trick of e6. Looks like it snags it very well, but I think bishop to d6 is actually pretty brutal for black to deal with. But a good move here for black is knight to a6. They're going to snag this pawn. They shouldn't have any issue doing it, really. And, you know, b4 is not an option, the knight controls it, and the position's just equality, and it's no longer the London structure. This is why, like, London players don't go for this. c3 is an option, but I think it's not a good one, because I think queen b6, and there's just no good way to deal with this b2 pawn anymore. There's just no good options here, because queen b3, as you see most people are playing, doubles these pawns awkwardly, and I think after these series of exchanges, there's now knight to b4, in addition to ending this pawn, so it's not a fun line for white to deal with pawn to c3. Okay, so let's get back to pawn to e3 and queen to b6. This is the most forcing London line. Okay, so like a lot of Londons just end with like, you know, solid structures here, or like King's Indian transpositions, or like d5, like a queen's pawn kind of thing. But this is the most dynamic and the most forcing lines you can play. So queen to b6. Okay, so there's a hit on b2 here. And you see knight c3 and b3 are the two most common ways to deal with this hit on b2. So queen c1 is off the table because this is just a hanging pawn. It's simply a hanging pawn. So how else do you deal with b2? If you do play pawn to b3, so this is another plus of this line is that some people might just like not know what they're doing with queen to b6. How do I deal with this? Well, the only thing I see is pawn to b3. Pawn to b3 is not a good move because it undermines this kind of solid dark square pawn structure that white was looking to create. And after a move like g6, I think g6 is a very good move. Oh, I've already made all sorts of arrows here. But basically, yeah, that bishop on g7 will sit very, very nicely. It has some good targets there on d4 and on that rook, and you can already see here how black's planning to develop. You can hit that even more with d6 and e5. So this position is already for choice for black because like a lot of pressure on d4, a lot of pressure on these dark squares. This bishop kind of wishes it were on b2, in which case it could patch things up. Otherwise, it's kind of just a target here. So b3 is not a good move. Okay, so there's the two moves here, knight c3, and its sister move, knight a3, as Eric Rosen has recommended. So knight c3. So now there's two lines that are considered very playable for black here. One is queen takes b2, of course, and the other is this move pawn to a6. Pawn to a6 just takes knight b5 off the table. Knight to a4 looks like it might win a pawn, but there's this move check. So pawn to a6 just takes that off the table, and now the rook to b1 to just deal with b2 permanently, and then both sides continue playing, and it's a game, and it's approximately equal. So pawn to a6 is a good option against knight c3. However, the reason why Eric Rosen recommends this move knight a3, so both have the idea of coming into b5 against queen takes b2, so it transposes a lot of the time, but if they play the similar move pawn to a6, there's now knight c4. Knight c4, a very nice move, hitting the queen, defending b2. This queen should retreat, and white has a very good position here. So knight to a3 is an additional option, but if you are a knight to a3 player, you are going to have to deal with this position every time. And the deal with this position, so whether the knight came from c3 or knight to a3. Okay, black here, I mean, the general consensus is that black here only has one good move. Queen to b4 check deals with pawn c3, and otherwise knight c7 is a big problem. Knight to a6 defends c7, but is considered not a good move. I am forgetting why. This is this move a3. Okay, so yeah, I think this will actually demonstrate some concepts very well. So basically with a3, I think this queen's just getting trapped. I think at the end of the day, that queen's just getting trapped. So it's like rook b1 and like queen c1, I think. Something like this. Or we need to cut that queen off. So it's saying like rook to b3, okay, and then this knight just comes back. Something that just boxes that queen in, right? So basically black needs a more dynamic try, which is this move knight to d5. So they've only moved two pieces. I mean, you really have to know what you're doing in this line, but it defends c7 and it hits this. So this is why like a lot of people are just playing rook to b1 and rook to a1 here. But there's this other line here with this move pawn to a3. It's like a completely forced line. Pawn to a3, a6, rook to b1, hitting the queen, queen a2, and now queen c1. So this is what I was thinking of before, and it's the one way that white can actually trap the queen. Black has cut their own queen off. This is just all theory. You got to just take my word for it. But yeah, you can see how many times this position has occurred. And then like e5, so then it's like takes, and then like c4 or something, because now we're hitting this. And so I've played actually a really interesting game against Eric Rosen in position like this. So you know, this is the line. This is the queen sacrifice line that white can go for if white doesn't want to accept the draw. So knight to d5, but very often people are just bailing out with rook to b1, rook to a1. So that's basically the current state of London theory. It's like, you know, you play this knight to b5 line, and if black knows what they're doing, you can either go for this queen sacrifice line, which is really not that fun for white, or you can kind of just end it in a draw. And so I hope my line kind of changes that dynamic. But so what would I recommend for white? What is my genuine recommendation here for white? How do you deal with b2, right? So this knight to b5 line, it's kind of meh. b3 is not a good move. And otherwise, like e3, I said e3 is my recommendation for white. So the move I would recommend here for white is still knight c3. But in this position, I would recommend this other option instead of knight to b5, knight g to e2. Knight g to e2, it's a bit lesser played, but at this point, the fun for black kind of dies, and the reality sets in, which is that your queen is on the verge of getting trapped unless it starts running away very quickly. I think, like, for example, after if nothing happens here, yeah, there's this move like bishop c7, which can cut the queen. So like if e6, yeah, now it's like getting trapped or something. So not fun here. Not fun. I think you're losing that queen in most lines at some point. So bishop c7, what a move. But knight to e2. So there's actually a couple very interesting games that I want to show here. One was a victory Aronian had over Giri in this exact position. But knight to e2, it's probably my recommendation for white. And I think it's a very solid gambit. So basically, like, this queen has to escape. And here, that's what Giri does. Just queen a3, queen a5, just running away. This was in a titled Tuesday. And this queen can get hit and just d takes c5. So white's already gotten their pawn back, and this queen just spent a few more moves. I mean, this is like 6 moves with the queen. All black's done is played knight f6, whereas white's gotten a lot of pieces out. I mean, white's structure is really weird. Right, like this is really weird. But white's gotten a lot of pieces out, right, to their credit. Okay, so but this was an interesting game. I'll just kind of scroll through it. So bishop to a6. So just e5. White's last moves were e4, e5, not caring that this rook was hit. I guess the issue is takes. And then, like, when knight takes happens, like, e6 is going to come. This knight's coming to c7, defended by that bishop. I mean, black's just, like, very cramped and can have a lot of issues here. So in the game, white still sacrificed that rook. Black tried to develop. But now both these knights are coming in, and they're threatening knight to c7. So knight a6 defends that. But now this knight needs to come back. Everything's super cramped. And now a beautiful, beautiful finish to this game by Levon Aronian over Aronian-Giri. I'll let you guys pause the video and maybe try to find the winning combination for white. Checks, captures, threats. Always got to check over the checks, captures, threats. Knight to d6, take, knight to f6, king up, and queen takes d6. Tangentially relevant to my video is this game, but I just thought this game was very, very nice. And so I wanted to show it. That was very, very nice finish between like 2 super grandmasters. This was I'll link this game in the description below. But that is my recommendation for white. There's another game here where Grischuk with the white pieces defeated Adhiban in the World Rapid Championships. And I mean, I can kind of scroll through these ideas as well. So basically, Grischuk is sacrificing that bishop, actually, which it's pretty interesting, just for this queen to cut off castling. And so it's like, what does this king do if there's no castling? So white's able to castle, but black had no such luck. Try to arrange some sort of blockade against this e file here. And now knight d5 is coming in. So knight c7 check is a threat. That knight's not going to be helpful because of this pin. So knight c7 is a big threat. So just rook to b8 in order to not lose that rook. But you see here, white just bringing in all their pieces, right? So my point is white can have like a lot of fun in this line. Another sacrifice here to open up this rook onto the queen here. So check, picks up the queen. Beautiful, beautiful stuff in these 2 games. I really like these 2 games. F5 is another just great move. This bishop was the one thing that wasn't doing anything, and we've got a pin here. So G takes F5, I think would run into a lot of troubles with check. And then once the king moves, knight takes e6 is a big problem. And again, black's pieces just are having a very hard time in this line. So this was, I think, yeah, a nice queen maneuver here to get to h6 to get around. And bishop h5 now threatening checkmate here. And there appears to be no defense to that, and which is why Adhiban resigned here against Grischuk. I'll link this game as well. Like you can give a spite check, but just king g2, and that looks like checkmate next. So against queen takes b2, I think against queen takes b2, I really like this rare gambit. It doesn't even have a name, but knight g to e2, you can see how uncommon it is. It's comprising just 2% of moves here. But I mean, like, it's a game. Like, the engine still prefers black and says, like, yeah, your queen does need to get out of here. But I think I hope this video, you know, provides my own innovations to London theory in terms of not only this recommendation of knight ge2, but also I think this main position of knight b5 that has been way overanalyzed with this knight to d5 move and etc. But c takes d4, the London Crusher 9000. In terms of names for this, I considered the George Washington Gambit as just someone who has beaten London. I'm from New York. Actually, there were a few Revolutionary War battles that were fought not far from me at all, just a few blocks away from my house, which I think is really cool. Maybe if you're from England, you don't think that's really cool. And so I stayed away from the more political names. I'm sure Britain has lost other battles other than against America. I thought maybe George Washington Gambit or Washington Gambit was a little bit too America-centric. And I like the London Crusher 9000. But if you guys have name recommendations in the comments for the c takes d4 option, they come take our rook, but we just play e5 in almost every line, bishop to b4. Some really cool lines. I'm going to link this Lichess study, obviously. And thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It means so much. It means so much. And one more time, peace out, Gambit lovers. This is the Gambit Man. Have a great day.